Hi everyone, my name is Nayara and welcome to my channel where we talk about all things bookish and story related in general. I'm so glad you joined me today because today we are going to be talking about The Hunger Games, which is a book that I dearly love and I'm super excited to talk to you guys about it today. So how I do book reviews is I like to kind of dive deep and talk about internal conflict, but because of that I might be like talking about some spoilers. So I wanted to kind of do like a spoiler-free section in case you don't want spoilers if you have not read The Hunger Games already. And then after that I will dive deep into it and go into an in-depth review of the Hunger Games, and I'm going to dive into all the juicy secrets and the juicy internal conflict and everything that this book has, because this book is very, very well done. It's really a masterpiece. And I feel like it doesn't get as much credit as this book deserves, because I know a lot of people talk about the Hunger Games and they talk about like, oh, you know, that was a good book, good movie. You know, I hear lots of people say things like that and just talk about like, oh yeah, I enjoyed it. But like, I never really hear people talk so much about like all of the implications that it has for us. And I don't oftentimes hear people like really talk about like the bigger message and theme of this book, but I feel like it is very important, and there's a lot in this, not just this book but the entire series, that are very important messages and important things that we can learn from this really well done book. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so to start, I wanted to talk a little bit about just the general plot of The Hunger Games. So The Hunger Games follows Katniss Everdeen. She is the main character, and in the beginning we're introduced to her and we get a feel for her life and how Katniss is just you know, a pretty normal girl. She lives in a dystopian society where they're divided into districts, and there's a capital that rules over all of the districts, and she lives in the poorest district. They're numbered 1 to 12. 1 is the richest, 12 is the poorest. She lives in the poorest district, and because of that she really has to learn how to survive because they're so poor. They do not, you know, have much money to buy food, so she starts hunting, which is technically illegal, but she does it to provide for her family. And so when the book opens, we're kind of introduced to Katniss. We see her going hunting with her friend Gale, who has been her like hunting partner and her friend for quite a while. We learn about how she does all of that because you know, she doesn't have a father. Her mother doesn't make very much money, and they don't have really like a very good source of income. So she hunts and gathers food, and that is their family source of food and income, because she'll also sell the different animals that she kills on the black market that they have in District 12. So yeah, that is basically the premise of this book. And of course, as I'm sure many of you are aware, because if you haven't read the book, you've probably seen the movie, the Hunger Games starts on the day of the reaping, which is where the Capitol takes tributes from each of the districts that they govern over, and the Capitol will take a boy and a girl tribute from each district, and they have to be between the ages of 12 and 16, and they put them in an arena where they fight to the death. So it's very gruesome, very cruel, very unfair, especially since they are children. But the Capitol does this because at one point in history, the districts rebelled against the Capitol and tried to free themselves from the Capitol. And they do this as a reminder that you cannot defeat the Capitol and that the districts will always be subject to this. And it's basically just a display of power by the Capitol. So, as I'm sure many of you know, the whole beginning of this book, and really what starts the whole journey of this entire book, is that Katniss, her name does not get called. She is not chosen as the tribute. However, her sister Primrose Everdeen, is chosen as the tribute. But one of the rules of the Hunger Games is that there can be one person who can volunteer in place of the tribute who is picked out of like a bowl of names. And so obviously Katniss immediately volunteers for her sister so that her sister does not have to go into the Hunger Games and die, because almost always the younger kids who are 12 and 13 and 14 usually, except for if you're Finnick, but that's another thing. But yes, most of the time the younger kids just die very quickly because they're not strong, and less likely to defeat the older kids who are much stronger than them. So of course Katniss volunteers to go in Prim's place. Okay, so that's really that's the beginning of this and what sets off the entire story. And so really you get to see Katniss go through the Hunger Games and she fights very hard to win the Hunger Games because she is doing it for her family. So I really, really, really love this book. This book is amazing. I did not read it until I was 16, which is not very common. I know like a lot of my friends read this book, when they were younger. But I waited until I was 16 to read this book, and I'm really glad that I did, because I feel like like I was the age of Katniss when I read this book, and I really felt like I could really relate. Well, not relate. I felt like I could really sympathize with Katniss and her situation, because I was a bit older and I could kind of understand, where she was coming from as a 16-year-old. But yeah, and also being older, I think also helped me realize like how the message of this book helped me realize more, that kind of thing. But anyway, so I really love this book. It's fantastic. It's really it's like a survival book, dystopian. But yeah, most of it is like the beginning is all setting up, oh, she's going into the Hunger Games, but then when she gets into the arena, it's all just survival. And so yeah, fantastic. The internal conflict is wonderful. There is such good internal conflict in this book. I definitely recommend it. If you have not read this book, please go read it. If you've only seen the movie, please go read it, because the movies are actually very good, but there's only so much they can do in movie form, and the books, you get to see all of Katniss's thoughts, and you really get to see that side, the internal side of the story, as just opposed to the external things that happen. So yes, please read it. Fantastic. now we are going to dive into the internal conflict side of it. We're going to dive into, spoilers. If you have not read it and don't want spoilers, don't keep watching. Yes, if you're here for all of the good, juicy goodness, and you're kind of bored and you're like, I already know all that, Nara, why are we talking about this? Move on to the juicy stuff. This next part is for you, because I'm going to be diving deep into this, reading some excerpts that I feel like are super important, some little bits and pieces, and you can see I took notes because the internal conflict in this book is phenomenal. So, starting with the internal conflict, I wanted to tell a little bit of a story first, though, because it took me forever to figure out what the internal conflict in this book was. And I attribute that to how well Susanna Collins hit it. She didn't make it super obvious and super apparent, and it took me a while to figure out what exactly is Katniss's deal here. I knew the book was super intriguing. It was definitely an obsession book for me. When I read it, I just could not put it down. I read through the series so fast, but I could not figure out what the internal conflict was. It took me a very long time to figure it out. It wasn't until more recently that I figured it out, actually, because, I read through the books, watched the movies. I couldn't figure out for a long time. And then recently, I watched the movies, and it got to the part in the movie where Peeta says, I don't just want to be a piece in their games before they go into the arena. He says that. And, at that moment, it just, kind of clicked in my brain, and I was like, oh, no, that's what it is. I could not figure it out for such a long time, and then it finally clicked. And while I was watching the movie, from that moment on, I paid attention, and I realized that is exactly what it is. I mean, that quote just helped me realize it, and it kind of has to do with that quote too. And I was like, oh, no, that's what it is. That's what it is. I was so excited when I figured it out, and I recently, after I watched it, reread these books, took all these notes, and now I'm making a video because I was so excited that I finally realized what the internal conflict is, and it's really great. Okay, also, internal conflict is a fabulous way to figure out the message of the story and really what the author wants you to take away from the story. Because if you can figure out what the character's misbelief is, if you can figure out what it is that is kind of untrue that they are believing, then you can figure out what is the truth that they do learn and what is the truth that the author wants you to know, and kind of that can help you figure out the message of the overall book. So, the internal conflict in here, it's hidden very well, but if you go through and you pick out the important parts of the story, you go through and you look at what's the inciting incident, what's the thing that happens in the beginning that starts the entire book, what's the aha moment when the character finally realizes, oh, this, I've been wrong about this the entire time. This is actually what I should have been thinking about. If you go through and you pick out these important parts, if you can kind of figure out, if you go through and pick out these important parts, and from that you can kind of glean and come to understand what the internal conflict of the character really is. So, the inciting incident in this book, obviously, as kind of mentioned before, is when Prim's name gets called. Okay? So I'm gonna read it because it's very impactful. It's time for the drawing. Effie Trinket says, as she always does, ladies first, and crosses to the glass ball with the girls' names. She reaches in, digs her hand deep into the ball, and pulls out a slip of paper. The crowd draws in a collective breath, and then you can hear a pin drop. And I'm feeling nauseous and so desperately hoping that it's not me, that it's not me, that it's not me. Effie Trinket crosses back to the podium, smooths the slip of paper, and reads the name in a clear voice. And it's not me. It's Primrose Everdeen. Oh, so good. So that moment right there, that is the inciting incident. Because up until now, in the very first chapter, we see Katniss going about kind of her daily life of hunting and gathering food, trying to provide for her family whom she loves dearly. And at that moment, right there, it all kind of just collapses and comes to ruin because now her sister is being put in danger. Now her sister is being called to go into the Hunger Games. So what is she going to do, right? And that is kind of like her fear, right? Is that her family is going to be hurt, that her family is going to be injured. And so, she feels like she needs to protect them and care for them. So, of course, Katniss volunteers as tribute for Prim. Okay, so what the inciting incident really tells us, the inciting incident is always, it happens in the beginning of the story, and it kind of sets the entire rest of the book in motion. It's like a big event that happens in the beginning, and you're like, oh no! And it sets the rest of the story in motion, it carries the plot, but not only does it set the plot into motion, it also makes the characters' internal conflict start going crazy. Because the inciting incident should push the main character outside of their comfort zone. They've been living in their little bubble, happy with their life, or not so happy, whatever it is for them personally, because it's different for everybody. They've been living in their little bubble, and now, oops, you get pushed outside because this thing happened, and now you have to face your fear, your misbelief, all of the warring emotions inside of you. Okay, so that's obviously the inciting incident. When Prim's name gets called and Katniss volunteers, that is her plan. She's like, okay, my sister's name got called. I cannot let her go in there. I need to protect her. I'm going to volunteer, and I'm going to go in instead. And Katniss, very quickly after that, makes the decision that she is going to win because not only by volunteering is she protecting her family, but she's also the breadwinner for her family. So she needs to survive in order to continue to care for her family. So she immediately makes plans. I'm going to win this thing. I'm going to try my absolute best. And she immediately starts playing the game, the Hunger Games. She immediately starts preparing for that entire, being in the arena. And the fun part about the Hunger Games is that the games don't start in the arena. It actually starts before that. And, you don't necessarily realize that at first, but you quickly learn that when you start reading it. Is that it's not like the Hunger Games starts as soon as you're put in that arena. It starts before that too. And so immediately she starts kind of playing this game and wondering, who's on my side? How am I going to win this thing? What's going to be my tactic? Like, all these kinds of things start happening. And as you go through the story, you learn about, they're preparing for this, they're doing that, she's training. Katniss immediately starts playing the game. But I don't think that's just because of the promise that she made to Prim, because she promises Prim, like, yes, I'm going to try my absolute best to win this thing and to come back. But she doesn't just try to win the games and play the games because she made a promise to Prim. She's also doing it because she feels like she has to, because she feels like she needs to protect her family, which of course is a good thing. But, she feels like she has to play the games in order to do that. So then, we go through the story. They start preparing for all the different things. We have her on fire in the parade in the beginning, towards the beginning, and then all of their training and all that jazz. She gets scored, then she gets her interview, and we go through all of that, and then finally it's the day before she goes into the Hunger Games, before she goes into the arena and actually starts fighting for her life. And the night before that, Peeta says something very important to her that I think needs to be read, because it gives us a little bit of a hint as to what her real internal conflict is and what really the message that the author is trying to share with us, and kind of the lesson that she wants the character to learn in this story. So I'm going to read this little excerpt from when Peeta and Katniss are on the roof in the training center. Okay, so Peeta says, "It doesn't matter, Katniss," he says. "I've never been a contender in these games anyway." "That's no way to be thinking," I say. "Why not? It's true. My best hope is to not disgrace myself," and he hesitates. "And what?" I say. "I don't know how to say it exactly, only I want to die as myself." "Does that make any sense?" he asks. I shake my head. How could he die as anyone but himself? "I don't want them to change me in there, turn me into some kind of monster that I'm not." I bite my lip, feeling inferior. While I've been ruminating on the availability of trees, Peeta has been struggling with how to maintain his identity, his purity of self. "Do you mean you won't kill anyone?" I ask. "No, when the time comes, I'm sure I'll kill just like everybody else. I can't go down without a fight, only I keep wishing I could think of a way to show the Capitol they don't owe me, that I'm more than just a piece in their games," Peeta says. That line right there, very important. I'm going to read it again. "Only I keep wishing I could think of a way to show the Capitol they don't own me, that I'm more than just a piece in their games." So good. And this is what Katniss says. "But you're not," I say. "None of us are. That's how the games work." Boom! Right there. Did you see that? Did you get that? Peeta is saying, listen, when we go in there, the Capitol has been controlling us. And when we go in there, I don't want to be controlled. I want to be more than just a piece in their games, right? And Katniss is like, that's not how this works. You are a piece in their games. You just have to accept that and deal with it. There, right there. That golden little line. It's hidden in this big conversation that they're having, right? It's not like it's like highlighted and big fancy letters and they're saying, hey, look here, this is exactly what Katniss's misbelief is. This is exactly, what the internal conflict has to do with. It's not like painted in bright letters for you to see, but it's like intricately woven into this conversation. But that sentence right there, it's right there. That is super important for the internal conflict, because later we'll see that the entire message of this book really revolves around being more than just a piece in their game. So let's keep going, and we'll get to that part in a little bit. But right now, in this part of the story, Katniss is still under the idea and under the belief that we are a piece in their games. We are. There's no way we can change that. We can't fight the Capitol. The Capitol's too strong. Okay? After that, Katniss goes into the arena. They all go into the arena. She's, trying to survive. Luckily, as mentioned in this little excerpt that we just read, there are trees in the arena, so she is able to there are trees in the arena, so she's able to hide in the trees because she likes the woods, and there are woods in this arena, so she's able to survive very well. And we go through, all of that, her surviving, and then we see her teaming up with Rue after Rue helps her escape the careers. Also in this section, we find out that Peeta joined the careers, and that's like a huge shock because you're like, excuse me? What? You're joining the careers? And in case, well, actually, if you're watching this part, you should know who the careers are. But in case you don't, the careers are the tributes who typically win. They're the tributes from District 1, 2, and 4. So they're usually like the fittest, best. They kind of make a career out of going into the Hunger Games and winning the Hunger Games and getting the prize at the end. That's why they're called careers. Peeta joins the careers, and Katniss is like, excuse me, they're trying to kill me. So she's shocked by that, and then she teams up with Rue after Rue helps her kind of attack the careers and get away from the careers. She teams up with Rue, and then they have a whole plan of how to destroy the careers' supplies, because they have this huge pile of supplies and everything. And then we get to the part where, they do that plan, the careers are left with nothing, which means therefore that it's more likely for someone who doesn't have all that supplies to be able to win. Someone like Katniss, right? And then Rue dies. One of the careers kills her. This part of the book, when I read it, I cried so much because it was so sad. I wanted to read an excerpt because when Rue dies, Katniss kind of has this awakening and this kind of like this, she's starting to understand kind of like her misbelief. She doesn't necessarily know what her misbelief is, but she starts to kind of like realize and like rebel against the Capitol. She starts to kind of realize like, I don't have to necessarily follow the rules all the time. I can kind of, start diverging from that. And so I'm gonna read this important excerpt from when Rue dies. I can't stop looking at Rue, smaller than ever, a baby animal curled up in a nest of netting. I can't bring myself to leave her like this, past harm, but seeming utterly defenseless. To hate the boy from District 1, who also appears so vulnerable in death, seems inadequate. It's the Capitol I hate for doing this to all of us. Gale's voice in my head, his ravings against the Capitol no longer pointless, no longer to be ignored. Rue's death has forced me to confront my own fury against the cruelty, the injustice they inflict upon us. But here, even more strongly than at home, I feel my impotence. There is no way to take revenge on the Capitol. Is there? Then I remember Peeta's words on the roof. Only I keep wishing I could think of a way to show the Capitol they don't own me, that I'm more than just a piece in their games. And for the first time, I understand what he means. Super important. I want to do something right here, right now, to shame them, to make them accountable, to show the Capitol that whatever they do or force us to do, there is a part of every tribute they can't own. That Rue was more than a piece in their games, and so am I. A few steps into the woods grows a bank of wildflowers. Perhaps they are really weeds of some sort, but they have blossoms in beautiful shades of violet and yellow and white. I gather up an armful and come back to Rue's side. Slowly, one stem at a time, I decorate her body in flowers, covering the ugly wound, wreathing her face, weaving her hair with bright colors. They'll have to show it Or even if they choose to turn the cameras elsewhere at this moment, they'll have to bring them back when they collect the body, and everyone will see her then and know I did it. I step back and take a last look at Rue. She could really be asleep in that meadow after all. Bye, Rue, I whisper. I press the three middle fingers of my left hand against my lip and hold them out to her, in her direction. Then I walk away without looking back. Oh, man. Sad, but very impactful, very important. That in that moment right there, Katniss is starting to realize, you know what? They don't own me. They can't make me play the game. That there is a part of every person that they can't own. So super important. She's starting to realize the truth. She's starting to see, I don't just have to play these games. The Capitol doesn't own me. They can't force me to do everything that they want me to do. The rules get changed pretty quickly after that. The rules change so that 2 victors can win if they are from the same district. And Peeta's still alive at this point. Peeta is still alive. So Katniss joins up with Peeta. He's kind of in bad shape. He has like a wound from when there was like a moment where he protected Katniss from the careers, even though he was like teamed up with them. He has a wound from that and he's dying. And so Katniss tries to heal him, and then we have all the shenanigans that happen. We have her going to the banquet, or the feast, not the banquet, sorry. It's called the feast. She goes to the feast to get the medicine to save Peeta. Also in this time, she starts to fall for Peeta because, you know, they're supposed to be in love. It's part of the whole, it's a part of the whole tactic that they were playing, or that at least like Peeta kind of came up with. Even though is actually, he actually really did like Katniss, although the whole time Katniss is thinking, he's just, it's just for the TV, it's just for the TV. He doesn't actually like me. Sometimes I can't with Katniss. But anyway, but she actually kind of starts to fall for him in this part. I mean, she gets confused, and, you know, by the end of the book, she's like, I don't like Peeta. You know, she's kind of has some misbeliefs about that there. The truth is that she does fall for Peeta a little bit. Starts to realize that she actually does really care about him. And then that kind of brings us to the end. Everybody starts dying. All the tributes that are left, like everybody has been dying. And now everybody who's left, there's a few people left, and then Cato's the last one who's still alive, and then Cato dies. And so then Katniss and Peeta are the ones who are left. They're the last 2. And they're from the same district, so they're like, yay, you know, we get to go home now. But the rules get changed back. Okay, and so this is the big dark moment, the big moment where everything falls apart. This is when Katniss kind of has her aha moment, and this is when like she kind of starts to realize and really owns the fact that I am not a piece in their games. So let's read the excerpt real quick from this big moment. Okay, so here's the announcement. Greetings to the final contestants of the 74th Hunger Games. The earlier revision has been revoked. Closer examination of the rulebook has disclosed that only one winner may be allowed. He says, good luck, and may the odds be ever in your favor. There's a small burst of static, and then nothing more. I stare at Peeta in disbelief as the truth sinks in. They never intended to let us both live. This has all been devised by the game makers to guarantee the most dramatic showdown in history. And, like a fool, I bought into it. If you think about it, it's not that surprising, he says softly. I watch as he painfully makes it to his feet. Then he's moving toward me as if in slow motion. His hand is pulling the knife from his belt. Before I'm even aware of my actions, my bow is loaded with an arrow pointed straight at his heart. Peeta raises his eyebrows, and I see the knife has already left his hand on its way to the lake, where it splashes in the water. I drop my weapon and take a step back, my face burning in what can only be shame. No, he says, do it. Peeta limps towards me and thrusts the weapon back in my hands. I can't, I say, I won't. Do it, before they send those mutts back or something. I don't want to die like Cato, he says. Then you shoot me, I say furiously, shoving the weapon back at him. You shoot me and go home and live with it. And as I say, I know death right here, right now, would be the easier of the two. You know I can't, Peeta says, discarding the weapon. Fine, I'll go first anyway. He leans down and rips the bandage off his legs, eliminating the final barrier between his blood and the earth. No, you can't kill yourself, I say. I'm on my knees, desperately plastering the bandage back onto his wound. Katniss, he says, it's what I want. You're not leaving me here alone, I say, because if he dies, I'll never go home. Not really. I'll spend the rest of my life in this arena trying to find my way out. I'll spend the rest of my life in this arena trying to think my way out. Listen, he says, pulling me to my feet. We both know they have to have a victor. It can only be one of us. Please take it for me. And he goes on about how much he loves me, what life would be without me, but I've stopped listening because his previous words are trapped in my head, thrashing desperately around. We both know they have to have a victor. Yes, they have to have a victor. Without a victor, the whole thing would blow up in the game maker's faces. They'd have failed the Capitol, might possibly even be executed, slowly and painfully, while the cameras broadcast it to every screen in the country. If Peeta and I were both to die, or they thought we were... My fingers fumble with the pouch on my belt, freeing it. Peeta sees it and his hand clamps on my wrist. No, I won't let you. Trust me, I whisper. He holds my gaze for a long moment, then lets me go. I loosen the top of the pouch and pour a few spoonfuls of berries into his palm. Then I lift my own. On the count of 3, Peeta leans down and kisses me once, very gently. The count of 3, he says. We stand, our backs pressed together, our empty hands locked tight. Hold them out. I want everyone to see, he says. I spread out my fingers, the dark berries glistening in the sun. Remember, these are the poison berries. In case you didn't know. I spread my fingers out, the dark berries glistening in the sun. I give Peeta's hand one last squeeze as a signal, as a goodbye, and we begin counting. 1, maybe I'm wrong. 2, maybe they don't care if we both die. 3, it's too late to change my mind. I lift my hand to my mouth, taking one last look at the world. The berries have just passed my lips when the trumpets begin to blare. The frantic voice of Claudius Templesmith shouts above them, Stop, stop, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to present the victors of the 74th Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen and Peeta Mellark. I give you the tributes of District 12. So, that's it. That's the big moment right there where Katniss finally realizes, wait a minute, I don't have to just be a piece in their games. I don't just have to let them push me around all the time. I don't have to let the Capitol control everything that I do. I don't have to suck up to them. I don't have to, bow down and do everything they want me to do. I can rebel, really. And she kind of takes on this fighting stance and figures out a way that undermines the Capitol. They have to have their victor, because if they didn't have a victor, the Hunger Games would be pointless and all the people watching it would not want to watch it anymore. So it would blow up in the game maker's face. So we won't give them a victor. We will both die instead. And so then they both get to go home and live happily ever after, right? Nope. We get all of these instead. We get, in this book, we're kind of thrown back into it, and Katniss realizes, Katniss kind of goes back. She goes backwards, and there are more threats, more things happening. She kind of regresses and starts, doing what the Capitol wants again, because once again, she needs to protect her family, because everything that she does is for her family. Well, that's what I have for you guys today. The main kind of internal conflict message of the story is really one of empowerment, really, because the whole thing that Katniss kind of learns on this journey is, I don't have to do what the Capitol wants me to do. I can rebel, and it takes her a while to actually, rebel. Like, she starts to rebel in this one. I'm going to do another book review on this, and she really rebels in this one, and then we have the whole rebellion in this one. So it's really a whole story, and finally they defeat the Capitol in this one, obviously. Otherwise that would be kind of sad way to end the story if the whole point of all those books was not completed. But Katniss learns that she can rebel in her own way, that she's not just a piece in their games. I think that is the biggest thing that she learns, because, she kind of regresses a little bit and, starts bowing down to the Capitol again, and just letting them push her around, and letting them control her. But, I think the biggest thing that she learns in the first book is that she's not just a piece in their games, that she does have the ability to do this, but it's her choice whether she does rebel, and her choice whether she does bow down to the Capitol and let them control her. So, yes, that is the first book. The first book is fabulous. I'm going to be doing a review on the second book, so please look for that. It's going to be a whole series. I'm going to do a whole review on each of the books themselves, and then I think I'm going to go back and talk about some of the other characters. I'm going to talk about Peeta and talk about Gale and talk about all these other characters that are in the stories as well. I'm definitely going to be talking about Snow and Coin as well. So it's going to be a whole series on the Hunger Games, because there is so much in these books. That is what I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching this. It's kind of a longer video, but that's okay. Thank you, my friends. Keep reading, because reading is wonderful and it always inspires you. Hopefully it inspires you. Keep on fighting, my friends, and I'll see you later.